can tell you, unions are saying wages should reflect the cost of living, and they are ready to go on strike over pay. However, governments argue that if they give you the big pay rises, it could push inflation even higher because companies might increase their prices to cover higher wages. So it's a catch-22 situation the way things are going. The companies that you are buying your products from would increase their prices because the government also has to increase the tax they get from them. And another very important factor, climate impact around the world. Extreme weathers in many parts of the world has contributed to inflation. I'll tell you, flooding destroyed many farmlands, even in Nigeria. Hurricanes, fierce waters, winter storms disrupted global supplies and microchips demand, even in North America. It affected me. I couldn't get a car. Coffee and other cash crops were also affected by severe droughts in Brazil and other parts of the world, and these resulted in poor harvest. And I can tell you, the war in Ukraine also led to food prices going up because we buy wheat from Ukraine and Russia. We rely heavily on them. And this is some of the things we have to look at before going into wars. And looking at trade barriers as well, there are also more costly import tariffs on goods, and this have to be passed on in form of higher prices to all of us. So many things happening, and also a lot of people in the third world may not understand this. There is also the end of pandemic support. Governments worldwide stopped support given to businesses during the pandemic to help the impact of coronavirus. And I will tell you, public spending and borrowing increased across the world during the pandemic. And this led to tax rises that have contributed to the cost of living squeeze, while most of us, our wages remain unchanged. So most developed economies have had policies designed to protect workers. We call it the follow, and welfare policies to protect the lowest paid. So some economists suggested that these policies could have maybe pushed inflation higher as the support measures drew to a close. So the problem is encapsulated in climate impact, the Ukraine war, and the coronavirus still affecting the whole world. So that's what I would say are the reasons.
Now, let us look at, you have ruled out quite a number of reasons why we are having what we are having today. Let us look at the prices of oil, which you said is on high demand, and because it is on high demand, the prices going up will definitely affect a lot of, major parts of the economy. Now, we have seen in recent times interventions from, through renewable energy and the rest of them. Now, despite these interventions from that angle, the solar and the rest of them, would you say that it has not really been impactful? Because if we have been having renewable energy efforts tilting towards renewable energy and the rest of them, and yet we still rely heavily on oil, on fuel and the rest of them to power companies, run companies and the rest of them, then can we say that we are really, as the world as a whole, can you say we are making impact in that direction, in the direction of a renewable energy? Or what is really making it that we are not really feeling the impact or effect of renewable energy in these oil problems that we are having?
Oh, well, I'll tell you, renewable energy around the world, especially when you're talking about solar, how many solar panels have we even installed in Nigeria? The problem is simply because we've relied heavily on oil and gas over the years, and fossil fuel is something that you cannot phase out without having the alternatives ready. But the question is, how many Nigerians are even connected to the national grid? And how many of us, even the rural electrification project, I was discussing with somebody today about DIFRI. So many years ago, I don't know, Akim might remember very well, Admiral Koshoni led DIFRI during Babangida's regime. That was the plan then, that they would even have electrification and rural infrastructure all over Nigeria. But the problem is a lot of people don't even have electricity, even the fossil fuel we are talking about. How are we able to even get the alternatives when even here there is electricity 24/7. They are also having the problem trying to transition. South Africa is also trying to transition from nuclear energy because they have nuclear plants. They are having serious problems like Nigeria as well. So we're not there yet. It's just like electric vehicles. It's only the UK that has been able to go very far when it comes to electric vehicles. But other parts of the developed world are also still struggling. So I'm not too sure we'll get there very soon. Maybe in a lifetime, we'll get there that we'll forget about oil and gas. But as it is, countries are still making money. The Arab countries, OPEC countries, don't want oil and gas to go. So they are not really putting enough effort to make sure we have it. And then looking at Nigeria as an example, do you even have electricity coming from the hydro power or coming from all we've been using? Remember, we all grew up, we remember the Shiroro dams, we remember Kenji dams. We're not getting enough. Sometimes you will have a national shutdown of this thing we are trying to move away from. How do you now get to talk about solar electricity at the mass level? It's not as easy as some of you might think it is. So we just have to still continue with oil and gas.
Okay, Dr. Akintayo, let's, all right, it's a global thing. It's a global thing, the high cost of living here and there. But people are surviving better in that climb than what we have in this climb. What has been the input of economics, so to say, and by extension government, to see that it is brought to the barest minimum and people can see tug on there. That is talking about the first world countries.
Well, I'll just say it's like, I remember I mentioned that countries here, meaning, I don't like using the expression of third world or developed countries because it's like everybody's having one problem or the other. But one thing they do in developed economies is like they have policies, like I said earlier, designed to help everybody. So if you are ill or maybe you cannot go to work due to an accident or something, there are welfare policies to protect you. And until the third world countries, so to say, can also get to that level, we have the money. Well, let's go into it. I'm happy that Nigeria is now trying to look into student loan. I will tell you something. People in developed countries find it very difficult to believe that some of us have to get our parents to sell land, have to sell our properties before we could go to university. But here, in developed countries, they have what they call the student loan, and you have to pay it back. I hope, and I pray, the administration of President Buhari will be able to do something, laying a foundation for that before they leave. But my concern is that will people be able to pay back? Remember what happened to People's Bank of Nigeria under Dr. Tai Sholami? It's still something that scares me about Nigeria. There are so many things that people will say, oh yeah, the government is not giving us student loan like it happens abroad. It's not giving us benefits like it happens abroad. But the thing is, like, let's look back. Why did some of these policies fail? Some of these things are the things that are still making us to still be where we are, in poverty, whereas we are the richest continent. We are the richest people on earth, and yet we are the poorest. So, and a lot of times, some of the trade agreements being agreed by our governments and developed countries, they made us to be poorer. So those are some of the things anybody coming in to take over from President Buhari has to look into critically. I know they're trying their best right now, but I'll tell you something. The situation is grim. It is scary. It's not the fault, it's not 100% the fault of the government. I'll tell you why in a moment.
Okay, so can we also even look at that, go there right now?
Okay.
Where should we begin to pitch the blames, or on whose shoulders, should we begin to pitch the blames? And what can these individuals or this group of persons really do to change the narrative?
Is it about blaming? So come on, the blame game. What should we begin to do maybe that's what should we begin to do so that I mean, Nigerians will be happier. Nigerians are not happy. We are bringing that to Nigeria now. Nigeria is part of the global community. Definitely, we have our own peculiar and specific problem. Just mention that if you give student loan, people might see it as the national cake. Any intervention is seen as a national cake, our own share of the money. So, how do we begin to change the narratives? And what should government do to actually make Nigerians happier?
Well, I want to say this, Kim, before I launch into what I want to say now. You know me, I'm fearless. I'll say it the way it is. I remember the last time I came to Nigeria, 2015, on the inauguration of President Buhari. On the last interview I had before I came back to, I was still in the UK then, I warned Nigerians, don't expect too much from President Buhari, not because he's not a good person, not because he's not a good president, but the expectations from Nigerians were just too high. It's not their fault. This is not a blame game. I don't do blame game. I look for solutions. But Nigerians are beginning to do that. Whoever becomes president next, please remember some of the problems lie squarely in our laps. And I'll tell you something, just like Dominic was asking. A few days ago, the National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, said something that was frightening and also shameful. 63% of Nigerians are poor, are in poverty. That's about 133 million. But, 133 million Nigerians. That is really shameful to get to know. But I'll tell you something, there is a limit to which the government, the federal government and the central bank can go to reduce inflation in Nigeria. And I'll tell you something, the federal government, after this Federal Executive Council meeting, because I monitor all these things every time, Clement Agba, the Minister of State and Finance, says something. He said he's going to blame state governments for what is happening, that it is not their fault that the poverty is happening. It's not the federal government's fault. So they are saying your governors should be blamed. I'm not saying that. It's Clement Agba and the federal government has said that. So what they're saying is that some of the governors, they get the money and they go and build flyovers all over the urban state capitals, including Abeokuta, the Ogun state capital. I could see that you have new flyovers and other vanity projects. I'm not blaming anybody, but it's just like what the federal government said. But what I just want to say is that instead of building vanity projects because you want to get back for a second term, or you want, or the ruling party wants to get back, I know it's a strategy. But how about the farmers who will bring the food that you and I would eat? They don't have good roads. They don't have rural electrification. They don't have water projects to make sure that the food you and I, including the governor, would eat, would get to our tables and be cheaper in the market. I remember when I was still in Nigeria, between Lagos and Abeokuta, I would buy cheaper food items in Shiu. It was cheaper. And I would ask the sellers, especially the ladies selling by the side of the road, how come it's not cheaper in Abeokuta or in Ketu, Lagos? And they said, transportation problems, all sorts of things. And I remember a distant uncle said something in the 1990s, Chief Femi Aderupoko Kuka. He said something about his farm in Odeta. He said the problem, he cries every time they are harvesting because half of his produce, they go to waste because they get rotten. They cannot transport them in, they cannot transport everything to the different destinations, Lagos, Abeokuta, Ibadan. And it's so sad. It's about 30 years ago. It's still the same thing. Chief Aderuboko, I think, is dead now. But let me tell you something. It's still the same problem. We are still not changing. And then another thing I'm trying to remember, we need to return to the past federal and state agricultural policies. I still remember the days of the agricultural development projects, Ogadep, Oyadep, Padama projects, Better Life for Rural Women, D3, even Operation Feed the Nation by General Obasanjo and Green Revolution. What happened to all of them? The same thing with schools. I remember 1987, Ijebuode, I was at Soniluba Comprehensive High School. I was really impressed with what I saw at Soniluba. They had mechanized farming, animal husbandry at its best. in a secondary school. But if you go back there now, maybe it's gone. What happened to having farmlands developed by schools and having children, the school children, to even get involved? You have the University of Agriculture in Abeokuta there. What is happening? How come people are not going there? I'm sure, Akim, you saw the pictures of picking strawberry in Canadian farms, picking apples. They have everything we have, everything you could think of in Abeokuta, even sweet corn. If I want to buy goat meat, I just have to drive 40 minutes away from here. They are not better than us. The only problem is the zeal to get there. Just before this interview, I was talking to a senior journalist, Mrs. Adeshola Ayo Aderele. She told me she gets her produce from the backyard farming. What happened to that? If you tell Nigerians all this, they're just like, oh, what are you talking about? Oh, you're abroad now. Well, I'll tell you, Akim, this is something you know. I was raising animals. Before I left Nigeria, even as a broadcaster, I was not doing it for the money. I just love it. I love farming. But a lot of people want to work in government offices. A lot of people, nobody wants to be a farmer. It should be a passion. We should have cassava. We should have everything. Even as a broadcaster, everybody should have a farm right behind the house. Even at the presidency, the president has a farm in Katsina. Femi Adesina also has a farm which he said he's going back to. What stops us? Instead of complaining about government every time. And I would say something very controversial. Enough of all these parties every weekend. People don't have money, yet you attend parties every Saturday. Why do you have to take money from people abroad, beg for money, and then you have to send your children to private universities, private schools? You want to send them abroad, and then you are just maybe a manager. You will definitely steal from the government coffers. You don't have to do because Akim has children in private universities. I have to do the same thing. You have to think about your past. There are other universities. I didn't go to a private university, and I'm proud to have gone to the University of Lagos. I've never really thought of it. Even now, if I have children that could go to universities, I'll still send them to the same universities. But sometimes you hear people saying, oh, they are so proud of it. Nigerians have to drop that attitude of like, I better pass my neighbor. Your child going to any of the private universities doesn't mean they are better. I got into broadcasting at the age of 15, and I read news on that channel for the first time in my early 20s. And I was the youngest to ever read news as a then. But I want to tell you something, I was not even in university. Your brain is not about going to private universities. So that's what we have to stop a lot of things. Nigerians, we are the biggest problems. Not President Buhari, not Obasanjo.
Dr. Akintayo, Dr. Akintayo, yes, you dovetail into saying whether we like it or not, everybody has a stake. We have to rebrand. We have to rebrand. That's the way I can summarize it. You are a communications and rebranding expert. Recently, our Naira has been rebranded. To what extent would that help shaping up the economy and making Nigeria better as a nation?
Well, I don't think rebranding the Naira it's just like the central bank trying to see how they can help to reduce inflation in Nigeria. But I also want to tell you, a lot of Nigerians did not realize this, because I've heard a lot of people moaning about the color of the Naira. We moan about trivial things. When there are bigger things, there are bigger fish to fry. But the thing is, like, in case a lot of people did not know, you have to rebrand your local currency every 5 to 8 years. The Central Bank of Nigeria had not done that in many years. So it's not like it's a Buhari thing. It's not like they're putting more hardship on people. It's just like the Naira has to be changed, to be rebranded for security reasons and other reasons every 5 to 8 years. But the government did not do that for a long time. So that's why they did that. But I'm not too sure how much, like I said at the beginning, how much the central bank will be able to lower inflation in Nigeria. But I'm not talking about government. Let's talk about ourselves. We have to stop this poverty and corruption. We are building a sick society with weak institutions if all we think about is just what can I get from government every time. Let's go back to the farms. Let us all think of helping each other. Let's help the government to help ourselves. So the only thing I would just say is that we have to change the way we look at life. We have to change our mindset. And I'll say something. The situation is worsening. Poverty is getting worse in Nigeria because you're having more children. 8 billion. That's what we are now. Last week we clocked 8 billion around the world. And some of us are still having more children. And then we expect people who are abroad to feed them for us. Some of us still have more girlfriends. We have more everything. We have more, even more cars. So that's what I'm saying, that if you have 3 cars, then you can reduce it, austerity measure. So that's why I'm saying that even here in developed countries, they cut their coat according to their size. That's what they do. So why can't we do that? Why is it that you always think that somebody abroad has to feed you? Somebody abroad has to pay your children's school fees. Somebody abroad, because you have brothers abroad, you can do whatever you want. But we have to think very, very deep. Even the people abroad are groaning. You remember, you don't hit your homes. We have to hit our homes here. So salaries are not increasing. So the money that people are giving out to families and friends in Nigeria, they can't do it. They can't do it anymore because it's affecting them. So you have to think, how do I survive? The government cannot really do much. My brothers abroad cannot do much. Then what do? We have to think of helping ourselves by going back to the farms and trying to do a lot of things. And then to the government, I will say, why don't we go back to the old policies? Let's talk to people who have done it before, or try to find out what they are doing in other countries. But remember, irrespective of all the efforts of the government, there is also the issue of climate change. We are building everywhere. And that's one thing people don't realize. We are warming Earth by building everywhere. Everybody wants to build a house. I understand. But remember, there is a reason why those trees are there. There is a reason why they are farmland. There is a reason why they are parks in developed countries, especially some of you who have traveled abroad. They don't just build anyhow. But I heard that even if I come back to my hometown, to my state of Ogun, I will not recognize a lot of places. Houses everywhere, because we all want to oh, I have a house. But remember, you are destroying the future. You're destroying the globe if you're building all over the place without plan. So I'm not saying people should not build, but there should be a plan.
Now, you talked about the need for us to go back to the farm as individuals, just to increase the food that we produce, and then so that they can bring down the prices of these commodities. But don't you think even the Nigerians are at a crossroad at the moment? I mean, because when you look at the spate of insecurity, which has to a very large extent driven a lot of persons out of the farmlands, some persons have been kidnapped, have been killed because they went to farm to go and farm. But that aside, with the lamentations that we're experiencing now, even the government is saying, come 2023, they are going to be removing fuel subsidy. What's your thought on this particular fuel subsidy as we coast home?
In 60 seconds, Tokunbo, we are running out of time.
With subsidy, I think the problem has been we are used to it over the years. So to take it off now, it's just like all I've been saying now. Some people will not like it, that they have to go into austerity measures again. But with subsidy, I think the only thing government could do is just to look at any way they can raise money to run the country. But I'm not saying, I'm sure if Nigerians have to pay more to buy fuel, but they are seeing the result, I think they'll get used to it and thank the government. But I don't think there is anything anybody can do about raising money for government. But one thing you should also realize, the government should also realize that if people don't see the dividends of the removal of subsidy, they will shout, they will yell at you. So that's why the only thing I can say is that the government should come around and work on developing policies that will make life good for everyone. Without
thank you, Dr. Akitayo. We must say it's been an interesting session with you. But lastly, before I let you go, it's like returning home via Zoom. So quickly, in just 30 seconds, what will be your message? I will allow you that. What will be your message to your family here at Ogtv? It's been long.
I just want to say thank you to everybody because, like, sincerely, everybody has been wonderful. I know a lot of people, I heard that a lot of people have died or some of them have retired, but I want to say the best time of my life, not just my career, was at Ogtv. And I'm not saying this because I'm on Ogtv. People know me for this. I'll say the best time of my life, you people gave it to me, and I would never forget. Even as of 2 nights ago, I remembered even the dead ones asking, where is Mr. Malik? Where is this person? And they'll say, sorry, they are dead. So I would never forget them. I miss everybody, even the viewers. Without you, I wouldn't be where I am today. I can say.
Thank you very much, Tokunbo. Thank you. That has been Dr. Adetokunbo Akintayo, who is a Canada-based communication and rebranding expert, and we'll be talking about global high cost of living, why and ways out. Thank you very much for joining us, and it's about 3:40 or thereabout a.m. in Canada, and I know that
I need to sleep.
you have to make a lot of effort to actually join us. Thank you so much. We'll take a break now, then we'll come back for the second segment of the discussion program. Friday edition of New Dawn with Dominic Agbeha and Akim Akitunde.